why would we build and spend tens of billions of dollars of public subsidy? We do not need a social enterprise in oil and gas. And it is divisive in our country, I would argue. It's divisive in our country to talk about these projects.
Well, Premier Smith, thank you so much for joining us. There is a lot to talk about these days.
Well, I'm looking forward to the conversation, Jasmine. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm sure you are familiar with it, I imagine at least. So you had been on CTV discussing kind of Canada's future, what's happening in Alberta right now.
So there's different ways to be able to go about doing this.
But that revenue could do other things. That's the point, right? You made the pitch initially that it could build the roads, build the hospitals, build the schools, and now it's instead going to go to oil companies.
Well, 100% of zero is zero, Vashi. Like, if you don't end up with production and you don't end up with revenue, there's nothing to divvy up. You have to begin with production. You have to create the environment where energy companies feel like they can get product to market and they can make money at it, and then we all benefit. But at the moment, we've had a situation where we've had cancellation of pipelines. The cancellation of Energy East, of Keystone, of Northern Gateway. That would have generated 2.5 million barrels a day more of production than we have right now, which would have been $55 billion of revenue that we don't have to talk about who ends up getting what share. I don't want that situation to continue. We have to get these projects built.
And then Premier Eby was actually on just shortly after you, and some of his comments I thought were kind of interesting in terms of Canada's economic prosperity, our energy security. And there was a couple of things that struck me very much so about what he had said. One of them being TMX. He was kind of arguing with their host about how he doesn't want to expand any pipelines. He's not really that open to those conversations, or that was kind of at least the out-facing front. And one of the big reasons he said for why that was the case is because the government had to previously subsidize the TMX.
Well, I've said very clearly to Premier Smith that if she's able to arrange that, then we're happy to sit down with Alberta and have that conversation with them about what that would look like. But let's be honest with ourselves. We have a $36 billion pipeline that's publicly owned that the federal government cannot sell. It's not even operating at capacity. There is not a world in which that pipeline across the north happens without significant federal subsidy. If the Premier of Alberta is able to pull that off, I say more power to her.
Why do you assume that federal subsidies would be needed?
They were needed for the last one.
Yeah, they were needed for the last one, but they haven't been needed for everyone. And to be fair, that pipeline is adding 0.5% to our country's collective GDP. Like, that is not nothing.
His argument was that, well, I can't commit to that kind of government spending because we had to do it last time. And I'm curious, it's been a couple days now, but what are your thoughts on that talking point, I guess, that it's not quite the full story of what happened with TMX?
Well, I would say a couple of things. I mean, if you look at the energy infrastructure that most provinces build, it's electricity infrastructure. And that is mostly Crown Corporation money. They mostly have governments who are leading that. And it's in the order of tens of billions of dollars, and if not hundreds of billions of dollars. In fact, if you look at, for instance, the Site C dam that was just built, it cost $16 billion to do, and it's going to take some time before that's paid back. So it is not unusual for governments when you have these kind of big projects that are essential services for them to step in and de-risk it in some way. We never used to have to do that in the pipeline industry. Yeah, in fact, it used to be a great free enterprise industry because you could put a project on the table. Everyone understood the product was necessary. And so there weren't a lot of hurdles to getting it done. And something changed about 10 years ago, and it became impossible to get those built. And what changed about 10 years ago was the Liberal government. And they put through a whole pile of policies, the C-69, which creates a convoluted regulatory approval process, tanker ban, making it illegal for companies to talk about their green records without going to jail on the grounds of greenwashing, net zero power grids, net zero cars, net zero homes, the whole gambit. We've had a constant barrage over the last 10 years of a government that has clearly been trying to do everything they could to keep oil and gas in the ground. So guess what happens when that occurs? Private sector says, well, if you don't want us, we'll go elsewhere. And they did. They went elsewhere around the world. Now what we're trying to do is create is to undo a lot of those terrible policies so that we can attract the private sector back. I certainly wouldn't look at having to build another pipeline with government money as being a success. It would be, I think, a failure of the exercise. The exercise we're going through right now is how do we restore investor confidence so that the private sector will have confidence in investing in Canada again? And that includes pipelines. That's what I'm aiming for.
You know, you brought up a point there that I actually had not even considered at all. So thank you. And Carney's platform is a costed platform there. He had allocated, it was over $100 million at least to go towards certain types of enhancing things. And of course, it was all under the guise of climate. And that's a really good point because I hadn't considered that, you know, that is already going to be the game plan if it comes to having green tech and green investments and green entrepreneurs and all that stuff, that there actually is already set in stone money federally that they are willing to allocate to those projects that they simply are not. So yeah, 100% to your point there, to argue, oh, there's going to be all this government money involved. It's like, yeah, that's kind of how things, they already have that in other sectors, if that is the case.
And, you know, I don't love it when governments intervene. I mean, I think the ideal situation would be is if you could create a low tax environment and have an easy regulatory process, low cost power, highly trained workforce. Those things should be sufficient to be able to attract investment. Unfortunately, what we've seen now is that because there is so much government intervention to tip the scales for one type of technology or over another, it has created an environment where there are a lot of industries that are seeking some kind of de-risking dollars in order to get projects underway, whether it's in wind or solar or nuclear or interties or any of the new green investments. So I think what would be far better is let's get back to something approaching a more neutral environment where the best project will win because it's got the best opportunity to provide a good service at a low cost. That's ideally where we should be trying to head to. We're a long way away from there. And so what we have to do in the meantime is try to work with the federal government to repeal or replace or revise the terrible laws so that we can have an investment climate that will do the work for us and it won't require taxpayers to take on the risk.
You know, in the event that pipelines continue to be muzzled by the federal government and all of the regulations that are ongoing, and you're completely correct as well when it comes to that investment, you know, it's how on earth is there any vow of support for industries, for other businesses, whether that be at home or foreign, who want to spend their money in a country where policies like this are changing all the time. You know, like we had the consumer carbon tax removed and then it's on and then it's industrial. It's so chaotic. But in the event that continues to happen, and it does appear to be the case thus far, what exactly is the backup plan? Like, what do you think that would look like for Canada's future when it comes to Alberta as a whole, as well as the entire country, as Alberta funds a lot of the revenue that this country does generate? So what does that look like to you if pipelines continue to be halted, installed, and canceled?
I think it would be a sad commentary on Canada, frankly, because the reason why we're having this conversation is that we are now facing uncertainty in our relationship with the United States. And as a result, we have vowed at the Premier's table to support each other in trying to open up new markets and get our products to those new markets. In Western Canada, the most obvious example of that would be our proximity to Asia and all of the opportunities that are available there. It would take 8 to 10 days to get to South Korea and Japan. We can get on to China, to India, and then through the Middle East as well. So we have the ability, I think, to serve an underserved marketplace with the products that they really need, and not just oil and gas, but also all the critical minerals, all the food products, all the forestry products. This is why I've been quite keen on developing out the Port of Prince Rupert as a destination port. It already exports 30 million tons a year of product. It's got a rail line that if we twin that line, then everybody can benefit from that. And so those are the kind of things that I'm really interested in looking towards, and I'm really hopeful that it will go through. The premiers have also talked about an economic corridor that would stretch all the way from Port au Prince Rupert to Churchill, with Churchill being another avenue for us if we get icebreakers in there to have similar multi-use port infrastructure so that we can export all of those same products onto Europe and also the East Coast of Canada. And I'm excited about working on those things. But if for some reason the federal government isn't prepared to make the changes, I have to say the Americans are still very interested in working with us. But it would be a sad commentary if I have to go to the Albertans and say, you know what, I can't unfortunately work with Canada. We're going to have to spend more time working with the U.S. We're going to have to restart Keystone XL. We're going to have to figure out a way to extend pipeline capacity down there, because I think that would be a failure of what it is that we're trying to do right now. We've seized a moment in Canada where we could be truly Canadian and supportive and live up to the promise of this country. And one of the big promises of this country was that through trade and commerce power being granted to the federal government, that they would ease the way to getting our products to market. It was never given to them so that they could block access from a landlocked province to getting their product to market. So this is a moment where Canada has to decide if we're going to act like a real country, supporting each other or not. But I can tell you, Albertans know that we would still be able to continue with developing out our north-south ties if we have to. But that being said, I think it'd be better for Canada if we work together to find new markets.
I do want to talk a little bit more about that relationship, as well as some of the incredibly harsh criticism you have faced as a result of trying. But before I get into that, I wanted to touch on one other thing, which is the EV mandate, of which the Liberals are very gung-ho about. They definitely want to be keeping. And so in your eyes, an EV mandate, what sense does that make? Do you believe that will actually go through when push comes to shove? And what would the ripple effect be on Canada's industries and economy?
It's idiotic. There's no other way around it. I am all for trying to find ways of reducing emissions. The most obvious thing to reduce emissions right now is probably hybrid vehicles, because we don't have the electricity infrastructure anywhere in this country to be able to support a 100% EV market, and we may never. We also have vast distances between our major cities. So zero emission vehicles, especially EVs, make far more sense driving shorter distances within cities than long distances. And there's an uncertainty factor that a lot of consumers have. If you do have a lot of long haul distances, or you have any uncertainty, you don't want to be stranded at a roadside, there's just not, the technology needs to improve a bit more before people would be willing to openly adopt it. That being said, that takes time for that to develop. And yet the federal policy is that we're all going to have to start buying electric vehicles January 1st. 20% of all vehicles sold in Canada are supposed to be electric vehicles. Number one, Canada doesn't make that many. Number two, America doesn't make that many. Number three, China makes that many, but no one wants us to buy them because they put 100% electric vehicle tax on them. So what are we doing here with this kind of pretzel logic? Are we trying to support Doug Ford's auto industry? If we are, then we would be looking at the 10 vehicles that are finished in Canada, including some of the hybrids, and saying that we're all going to put those into our fleet, that we're going to try to prioritize buying those types of cars. And then we would have a more reasonable period of time for allowing hybrids to develop, to allow electric vehicles to develop. In our market, it makes more sense for it to be hydrogen vehicles. We've already purchased a couple of hydrogen vehicles on our fleet, Toyota Mirais. We are working on building hydrogen locomotives with CP. We are testing out hydrogen buses. We've got natural gas powered buses. We have dual use vehicles that we're looking at for diesel as well as hydrogen. We've got hydrogen home project that is a pilot project. We're allowing hydrogen to be put into a gas stream for home heating. That makes a lot more sense here. But again, it's in its infancy. You can't snap your fingers and have these things being created as of January 1st. So it is another example of ideology winning out over common sense, and it's going to hurt everybody as a consequence. So I think that would be one of the easiest ones for them to say, you know what? Aspirationally, we'd like to get there by 2050, but we know that we can't get there by 2026, so we're not even going to try. But the fact that they seem unprepared to do that, it's not a good sign. It doesn't bode well for the other policies that we're trying to get changed.
And going back to some of that, U.S.-Canada relationship, you have been extremely vilified for your meeting that you took a number of months ago now with Trump, for going down and speaking with people, including Ben Shapiro, and being on, was it Turning Point that you were on their podcast?
It was for one of the think tanks down there.
PragerU, right?
Yeah.
Yes, sorry about that. But what exactly do you think when it comes down to what the Liberals are doing federally? And, we had Carney, they've said this dozens of times, but very recently, Canada's the most European, non-European country. We have to go with more trustworthy partners and trade and all of these things. A lot of comments that have been made by the federal government for a number of years already. But what do you think about the Liberals' vilification of the USA and the strengthened push for a tightened relationship with European nations, as well as perhaps some of the hypocrisy as a backdrop almost to some of those comments when it comes to, Mark Carney running on Canada strong and free and Canada sovereign, Canada being united, and then to go up on stage and say, we're not Canada at all. We're totally like Europe. Yeah, we look to you guys for all of, you guys are doing great things, even though your economies, most of them are doing far worse than ours, but we should really partner with you guys, even though we don't have anything in place to be able to do that, but we're going to keep telling everybody that. So just in general, when you kind of have both examples there, what exactly is it that you think is going on in your eyes? What kind of a signal do you think that sends to the U.S. and this continued vilification of Donald Trump in particular, of Republicans, and of the United States amid trying to negotiate what's happening between our nations right now?
It's not the approach I take. I believe in diplomacy when we're dealing with international partners. I mean, every time you approach a foreign government, one of the things you're looking for is to try to find common ground on policy as well as on trade issues. I mean, I think people forget that free trade agreements are not for the governments that sign them. It's for the businesses who are going to operate under the rules so that they can trade with each other. And so that's what we're focused on trying to do is to improve all of those relationships. And I believe in all of the above. I think we should maintain our strong ties with the United States. We should build out new markets to Asia. We should try to build out new markets to Europe as well. But the federal government has been extremely disappointing in that regard. I had no choice but to take a more active role when nation after nation after nation kept coming to Canada and meeting with the Prime Minister, and he kept saying, no, I'm sorry, there's no business case for us to sell you LNG or any more of these of this vital energy that you need. I guess it sucks to be you that you have to rely on Russia or Iran or other hostile nations. Too bad. I mean, I think that was a very self-defeating, self-sabotaging position that our former government took. So people shouldn't be surprised that I've gone out and took matters into my own hands and said, yeah, there is a business case, not only because we already have strong ties with the United States, but because we also have some of the strongest reserves in the world, 165 billion barrels of recoverable bitumen out of a 1.8 trillion barrel field, 1.4 quadrillion cubic feet of gas, of which about 144 trillion are recoverable at today's rates. Why would we even think that this is a product that we shouldn't develop? No country in the world would take an approach with that kind of resource wealth saying keep it in the ground. And yet that's the attitude that Ottawa has had. So as long as the federal government refuses to do its job, I'm going to keep on doing my job because we have lots of options. We can sell to our neighbors, both east and west and also north, or we can sell to our neighbors in the south, which we have in large volumes. And so we're going to continue to develop. I have an aspiration to double our oil and gas production because I also know that by doubling our oil and gas production, we're crowding out some of the more hostile competitors that are providing the product. We're a more reliable supplier. We care a heck of a lot more about the environment than a lot of the other producers. We're continuing to push the envelope and advance environmental technologies that can be used around the world. So the world needs more of us, and I will be 100% unapologetic about that. I think that's the real problem that we have with the federal government is they cannot seem to muster a full-throated defense and celebration of everything that this country has to offer. I can, and because I can, I'm going to continue to do it.
Well, that is a wonderful place to end this.
Thanks so much for your interest.
Yeah, thank you so much, Premier Smith.